All right, welcome back to the second episode of the Process of Fat Loss podcast. I'm Nick here at GCP with Trevor, and today we're going to talk about the number one thing that you can do for your health right now. So we're going to look at cooking oils and some different things that we use for cooking. And we're going to start off broad, go a little bit more specific as we kind of get into it a little bit more and talk about why it's the number one thing you can do for your health and how we can implement it into our life. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is why do people think that vegetable oils are good for you? You know, they've been around for a while. We use them in a ton of things that we cook with, and they come from vegetables. So you think they would be good, but why would you think that why do people think that they are good for you?
Yeah, so the first concept I want to think about here is out of all the things I could have chosen, out of things that are good that you can do for your health right now, why did I choose cooking oils? And the main reason is because we use it for everything. Like every single thing you cook in your house, you're going to be using these when you go out to eat. They're being cooked with. So it's really based on every single type of food, regardless of what kind of macro it is, if it's protein, carbs, or fats. Your cooking oils are involved in all those components. So I thought that's why the number one thing everybody could do if we could change that right now. So what it came down, like the reason people think that cooking oils are good for you actually goes all the way back to the 1970s. It was what happened was this company that was using vegetable oils. They were using it for varnish on homes. So they were varnishing wood and stuff with this vegetable oil. And all of a sudden they came out with these paint varnishes and made these vegetable oils obsolete. So these companies were like, oh crap, what can we do with these vegetable oils, right? And so then they started realizing there was a study done that it might be beneficial to use that to lower cholesterol. So they found out in the studies that it was beneficial to lower cholesterol. So they started implementing this into the market, the nutrition market. And so that's where it started getting into it. So way back in the 70s is when it started. And then after that point, there's a lot of money in vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are easily made. They can be processed from all the excess stuff that we have in vegetables, from corn oils to soybean oils. All that excess stuff needed to go somewhere so they could easily create it. So looking at that idea is that's why people think it's good for you is honestly, it came back from the idea that in the 70s, they wanted to push the product into a thing. And it came down to, they said that lowering cholesterol was beneficial. So kind of on the reverse of that idea is the only issue really is it's actually lowering cholesterol isn't really that good for you.
So what exactly would be the thing with vegetable oils that would make them bad for you, and why would lowering cholesterol not be good, or what exactly is in them that makes them not particularly good for you?
Yeah. So lowering cholesterol, and so cholesterol is a big topic, and I'm not going to go deep dive into cholesterol, and I think that's something we can talk about on another podcast. So let people kind of ignore that component a little bit, but just lowering cholesterol leads to higher mortality rates, suicide, depression, increased violence, reduced recovery rate from heart failure. So the medical industry really kind of had that all backwards, right? So like I said, we can talk about that again on another podcast because I do think it's an important topic. But because of that got people confused is the medical industry thought that lowering cholesterol is important. So when they brought these non-saturated fat oils into the market, that it would help reduce one of the causes that they thought was an issue based on some studies they saw. Unfortunately, the studies were read incorrectly. So the main issue with these products is that they cause a ton of free radical damage, such as inflammation. And it's probably the number one cause of almost all basic nutritional deficiencies is inflammation, right? So if you think of a lot of people's issues that deal with rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, eczema, things like that, they're inflammatory based diseases, right? So the issue is we need to reduce the inflammation in the body from the negatives of this. So what vegetable oils do is they increase free radical damage and they increase inflammation, which we already have a ton of issue with in society. So we need to start reducing that. It's honestly one of the reasons that it was used for paint varnish back in the day is because they easily stripped stuff away from wood and other components. So when it came down to that, it's you can see it in the physical world what's happening. Imagine what it's doing on the internal side of the body. So from there, there's just a bunch of I was going to list out a couple of the negatives of PUFA. So what we call these are polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? So that's called a PUFA. So that's just the short term. You'll hear us say it a lot. It's just easier than saying that big mouthful. But a PUFA, if you ever hear that, it's a polyunsaturated fatty acid. And so some of the main diseases that this thing's associated with of having vegetable oils in your diet are cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, Crohn's disease, slow wound healing, increase estrogen while decreasing your SHGB, which is just your sex hemoglobin markers, suppress immune system, reduce fertility, increase in allergies, and impact neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's and dementia. And so when you list that list, it's obviously a huge list, but those are the main metabolic syndromes that our society, American society, is kind of what I point everything back to. American society is dealing with all of those issues. So if we're dealing with all those issues and we know that based on all the studies that these things cause that, what if we just eliminated them because they're not needed in our society? They're not needed to cook with them. We can cook with other things. So if we could eliminate those, let's just see if we can start to reduce one load on our body of inflammation.
So we know that PUFAs are bad, right? They're in vegetable oils. Could you just give like a brief exactly what they do and kind of a little snippet about why they exactly cause that stuff in our body?
Yeah, I don't want to go super scientific into this, and I even get lost.
It's a lot.
I get lost in a lot of it, and it goes back to like freshman year of college, like understanding double bonds and single bonds and things of that nature. But what it comes down to being is you have your monounsaturated, you have your polyunsaturated, and you have your saturated fats. And when it comes down to our mitochondria, which is the cell, right? So in our cell, it can break down this energy. And what it does is it breaks it down. A saturated fat, it's reverse what you would think. If you have a saturated fat, which is a solid unit, our body actually doesn't, when it has multiple bonds to break down, it's actually a negative. Whereas you think if I have multiple bonds, it's more beneficial, right? If I add more things, it's more beneficial, but it's not beneficial when the body does it. When it breaks down other particles, it's not a good thing. It's easier for it to have one unit than multiple units. So when it goes down to the double bond of PUFAs, what it does is it goes down to, it breaks it down, and these extra bonds leave the system and end up becoming these free radicals. You've ever heard of like leaky gut syndrome and stuff? This is that stuff leaving the system and no longer being able to be used by the mitochondria and being free radicals of damage throughout the body.
Yeah. All right. So now we kind of established PUFAs aren't great, vegetable oils aren't great, can cause some damage to our body. So what are things that we should be doing to maybe take the place of them, or things we should be cooking with? And what are some specific things that we should be avoiding? Specific types of oils that we should be using, specific things that we should be not using? Yeah.
So some of the things that I'm going to recommend here, again, against the grain, I think most of the podcasts we're going to do are a little bit against the grain, because I think my philosophy on why we're doing this podcast comes down to being like, there's a lot of misknown information out there. And if it was right, people would be super healthy, right? All the stuff that's given out there, if it was right, people would be getting healthier, they'd be getting fitter, they wouldn't have these issues. So we need to start pointing out what are the negatives out there, the things that we don't agree with, and the things that are like misstrued in normal society, especially the nutrition society, because there's kind of a battle against what's right and wrong and like how much money is involved in these things. So some of the things I'm going to say you might disagree with, totally fine. We'll have podcasts to dive deeper into these things down the road. But one of the ones are, the best thing to cook with is saturated fats. And that's going to be a big argument from a lot of people. And I think we need to have a podcast just on saturated fats. I made a note on that, but I don't want to go too deep into that to make this podcast too long. So the first thing to think about when we're thinking about cooking oils, think about it versus liquid versus solid, right? The more solid something is, it's closer to saturated fat, the better it is to cook with. The more liquid or oil-based it is, the less you shouldn't be cooking with it, right? Because it comes down to like its boiling point or its heating point, and how it breaks down, creates all these free radicals. So it's better to have a saturated fat, which at room temperature is hard. So these are, besides obviously the saturated fat, there's also a monounsaturated fat, and we'll talk about each of those in point here. So the good fats to cook with are going to be ghee, butter, tallow, and coconut oils. They're all saturated fats when you buy them in a bucket, right? Or whatever you buy them in. They're hard, they're solid. You have to scoop them out of there and put them in there. The harder it is, the better it is for you to cook with. These things don't break down as easily, and they break down obviously based on heat, but inside the body, they don't break down easily into these double bonds. There's a single bond that our body can actually adjust. From there, we have the monounsaturated fats, so the MUFAs, so monounsaturated fats. These are okay to use for like using as something on salads or dipping sauces. So like olive oil, avocado oil, great to throw on a salad, have on the side for something to dip maybe breads in or whatever. But we don't want to use those for cooking, because when they start to cook and hit reach their highest temperature, they actually break down and they turn into free radicals as well. They pretty much become a polyunsaturated fat after a certain heating point. So we don't want to cook with those because there's a negative effect. If you get them too hot, we get a negative response from that. So if we don't do that, though, if we're just using them for drizzling over things, perfectly fine. They're healthy for the body. The body can utilize them because they are only a single bond instead of a double bond. And then we want to completely avoid soybean oils, canola oils, rapeseed oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil, pretty much all things that fit into a vegetable or seed oil base. We want to get rid of those.
All right. So now we kind of have the guide for what we should and shouldn't do. What are some things that we can kind of do in our lives, like that we can do right now to take action, implement these things into our lives right now? What are some steps that we can do, like right now after done listening to the podcast, even to add those to avoid vegetable oils and increase or use different things?
Yeah, and every podcast, my goal is to help you guys create a call to action. I don't want to just get information and not make it usable, right? Yeah. So we do want to create a call to action on these things. And this is my call to action. This is not like just take this one lightly. I think this is extremely serious, and it's very easy to change too. Yeah. So the first thing is, like, go in your cupboard and throw away all your vegetable and seed oils as soon as possible. Go through them. I have the list there. We're going to put this list link in the YouTube notes. We're also having a blog post, so you'll be able to find these things pretty easily. We might even take this list and put it on like a social media so we have those. So there's lots of places you'll be able to see this list, but my thing is go to your cupboard, throw them all away. Please don't donate them to those places, because like if they are really this unhealthy, nobody should be taking them in, right? So I got a bunch of peanut oil. I don't want to throw it away. Like, I'm going to take it to my neighbor. Like, no, you're going to make them unhealthy. That's not fair to do. You know it's unhealthy. Don't give it to somebody else. Don't give it to your dogs. If you ever give your dogs oils, like, I don't know, just don't give it to anybody. Just throw the stuff away and don't buy any more. Don't put any more back. And if your recipe calls for, like, it needs canola oil, that's fine. Replace it with coconut oil, olive oil. Well, if it's baking, you can replace it with olive oil or avocado oils, but you can't fry pan those two. But otherwise, replace it with coconut oils. Coconut oils, actually, the funny part is when you get them into recipes, you don't actually taste the coconut oil itself. It has a coconut flavor if you just like lick it or whatever. But like when it actually starts breaking down, you don't actually taste that coconut oil. So don't worry about it flavoring it coconut based. You won't taste the coconut base. Go ahead and buy coconut sprays, coconut oil, beef tallow. I think beef tallow is actually super underrated, and people don't even know what beef tallow is. It's just pretty much the lard of beef. You can get that super cheap most likely from your butcher. You can get it pretty easily. Otherwise, I just get it online. But it's actually relatively cheap, and it comes in you can get it in grass fed as well. You can get ghee. And if you can eat butters, if you can eat like dairy kind of stuff, go ahead and get butter as well, like a grass-fed Kerrygold butter. It'll be good to cook with. Get avocado oils and olive oils to use on salads and other purposes if you need to use those for those things. Keep those things on hand. Don't cook with them. Don't put them in a place you would cook, because we don't want, a lot of people keep their coconut oil and avocado oils like right next to the stove. We don't want to heat those up, because we don't want to end up creating these double bonds. Even if they're not being cooked with, they can still have a chance to heat up and become rancid inside the bottle. So we want to make sure we take those and put those in a cupboard that the sun can't see it. Even if they're in a glass bottle that's protected from that point, it's best to keep it out of the sun and out of the heat exposure. So try to put those away in the cupboards. So those are my main tips are like actually take physical action on these things to be able to, and it's so quick and so easy to do. Like, it'll literally take you minutes to do these things. And you'll feel so good. In probably about 2 weeks, you'll kind of see the response of how good you feel off that. One other thing I didn't talk about, or I didn't mention in the notes, is when you're going out to eat, it's almost impossible to avoid PUFAs, right? And so you can't really dictate what they're cooking with. You can ask the chefs and stuff. A lot of them won't make changes or anything to it. Biggest thing is, like, don't really worry too much about what's happening outside of your control. Inside your control is the stuff you can do at home, and that's where you really need to concentrate on those things.
Yeah. Thanks for that action step that we can take. Like I said, we'll have the list of things in our description, and then on our website and our blog, so you can kind of see that. But for anyone that's a little more interested in looking a little bit more into this, where would be a good source to kind of look a little bit more? If they have a couple questions, kind of look a little more into this topic. Yeah,
I think deep diving is important if you understand what you're reading and looking at. So my first tip is find a known, trusted source of somebody that you believe in. I'm hoping that the people that are watching this believe us and can believe our source. But I do understand that some people want to deep dive. But just understand, when you're going down the deep dive, you have to go in with a right thought process on what I'm looking for and what I'm going to take away from this. And you have to have a nice, well-rounded knowledge base to make sure you're reading and understanding the things. But the company that I love the most that goes nice and deep dive when it comes to polyunsaturated fats is actually UMZU, which is UMZU. They have supplements and stuff of that nature, but their big focus is trying to eradicate polyunsaturated fats from the world. And I think they have a great cause. So if you just go to their website, I know we'll attach a link to an article that I think is really good in the show notes. But you go to their website, they have a ton of articles on why PUFAs are bad for you and understanding exactly what PUFAs are.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us all of that information about PUFAs, why we should avoid them. I hope that you guys listening take some action, put some of this into your life, take the action step, get rid of them, and try to use a little bit healthier stuff that we have. Like we said, we will have this up on our website. We'll have some information in our notes below, and then also have the link to the UMZU article as well. But thank you guys all for listening. We hope to have you back for the next episode. Everybody have a great day.
Have a good day, guys.